Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Industrious Podcast. Thank you all for joining us. Welcome. Happy New Year. Welcome to 2024. New slogan, out with the old LFG in 23. We'll touch on that. Now we're rolling into the more in 24. However, before we get to 24, we thought we'd take this opportunity to do a little recap of 2023. This would be a great time for you guys to jump in the comments and throw out anything that you were happy to happen in 2023, things that you're glad to leave behind, things of that nature. So feel free to chime in. You can either agree with any of the things that we're going to talk about, join us in commiserating on any of the struggles that you might have had in 2023, etc. So here we go. And we're going to do it in 23 minutes.
Well, 22:04.
And yeah, man, we're down to 22 though. So I've just wasted 1 minute. All right, where do we want to begin? I think we break it by maybe business segment.
Okay. The happy to carry forward or the happy to leave behind portion?
Let's just do it. We can do a recap.
I feel like there's more happy to leave behind in a way.
It wasn't a bad year.
No, it wasn't a bad year at all. It was it was a weird year because I think it was the first calendar year since COVID where we started to see a shift from COVID craziness of 21, 22 carried into the early part of 23. And then we definitely started to see some level of correction, not necessarily revenue correction or demand correction, although there was a little bit of that in certain segments of industries, but just you could feel the shift, a sort of big picture in the latter part of 23 back to sort of pre-COVID normal in some ways. And in some ways that was good. It was kind of like oh gosh, thank you. In some ways it was like, oh man, did we just fall back into a bad habit or a bad practice? So it was a good year for Assessa, but also for our companies specifically, it was also in a way, not a rebuilding year, because it's not like, like the sports analogy where you graduate a bunch of seniors or you lose a bunch of players to the pros or whatever, or free agency or transfer portal or whatever the heck it is. But it was a rebuilding year for us in terms of we've had a ton of revenue growth over the last few years, and in consideration of the infrastructure we needed to invest in to keep up with that, battling against how do you find good people in a incredibly tight labor market. We I think when we had our year-end team event, we said we had a net addition of 15 new hires. So 15 new positions that we hired for in a very short period of time that kept everyone very busy and on their toes with onboarding and training and all the things that come with that, let alone a little bit of turnover. Nothing too crazy. Thankfully, we aren't ever a victim of too much turnover, but just some elements of sort of rebuilding or really kind of laying the foundation for that next floor for growth for 24 and beyond.
And we have more to go.
Yeah. We're not there yet, but we made significant headway, and we're not done, but feel a lot better about where we're going here.
Yeah, I think the weirdness, if you will, continues. Not so much. I don't know if you guys are seeing this, but not so much from the standpoint of things have fallen off a cliff or anything. That's certainly not the case. But when I say weird, maybe from a sales or market perspective, there's no consistency. So you go out to 10 different customers and 6 of them are still very busy, maybe not 2021 busy, but they're very busy. Another 2 are actually fairly slow. And then the other 2 are just kind of hit and miss. So there's no rhyme or reason. And there's not a macro trend, if you will, that blankets the market.
Yeah, and I think in last calendar year, so 23, we saw some some markets within or some portions of the industry and manufacturing world. Well, I guess I could take a step back. It seems like a lot of the segments of industry that we serve they're all in different phases of the business cycle. And in 23, we saw, well, really the latter part of 22, we saw the RV industry specifically start to feel some pretty significant correction due to softening demand, increased fuel prices, but mostly it was just inventory correction. Inventories got overbuilt. In the latter part of 22, you saw softening there as they tried to sell through inventory, and that went into 23. And really, the second quarter of 23, it started to pop back up. And about that time, as you got through the summer of last summer into the fall, then we saw some elements of residential kitchen cabinets, certainly residential furniture saw a softening, which you could say, okay, well, look what the real estate market did. Not broadly speaking, because even in real estate and residential home sales, there's still a shortage of inventory, which has really helped defend a little bit against rising interest rates. But you did see that impact of home sales, whether it be new home starts or existing home sales, soften. That impacted the kitchen cabinet industry, furniture industry, the reno market in general, because of higher interest rates, higher borrowing costs. And we're hopeful that 24, that the crystal ball that shows that should correct back to the upside. We should be hitting a trough and coming back out of that latter part of the business cycle there will show itself here in 24, hopefully sooner than later. But to your point, even if we focus on kitchen cabinets, there are a lot of kitchen cabinet manufacturers out there that we serve who are still quite busy, have solid backlogs, solid demand, and new orders coming in the front door are keeping pace with the orders that are going out the back
Housing
door.
starts are still going, so they're still making cabinets for that.
Well, yeah, that's improving. That multifamily and some of the new construction is really, I would say it's in the trough right now. But
there's still a shortage.
There is a shortage. Exactly. The housing inventory is not in line with the need for new housing. And if we can see, mortgage rates just fell recently for the first time. I think they're the lowest point in like the last 12 months or something like that, which is hard to believe, to think back that long. But it should start to kick some people who sat out on the sideline. And if you look back, it's 2024 and go back 20 years. So 2004, without looking this up online, interest rates were maybe 7-8%, something like that. Mm-hmm. And that was really pretty reasonable. In fact, somewhat low. And then the Great Recession hit in 2008, 2009, and mortgage rates went to nothing, and everyone was refining like crazy. But in almost the last 20 years, we haven't seen mortgage rates where they are. So if you bought your first home anytime in the last 20 years, let alone your second home or third home, as you've grown a family and whatnot, you have no idea what high interest rates even look like. You go back to, if you're in your 70s or 80s in terms of age, and you were buying homes back in the 70s and 80s, and mortgage rates were in the high teens to 20s, and you were just hoping to assume someone else's mortgage that was 12% when you bought a house, back when you had assumable mortgages, like 8% is nothing. But people who don't know any better think the sky is falling. And then you had people who've got, a fixed rate mortgage at 2%. And they're like, why do I want to give that up? So that also kept some people on the sideline. But I think 24 is going to shake things back up a little bit, hopefully to the good side.
Well, and I think for those who maybe held off from, they were late to the game on their renovations when everyone else was going gangbusters with those. Then interest rates on, let's say, an equity line, it went up to 8.5%. And they were like, oh God, I'm going to hold, we're not going to do this project now. We're going to hold off. 24 might be the time for them to start that, knowing that, they're going to pay a little bit higher interest rate on that, let's say, equity line now, but knowing that it's probably going to start coming back down some. It will not come back to 2 or 3%, but if it comes back to 5% or something like that over the next couple of years,
Yeah.
they're willing to suck up the 8% right now just to get the ball going.
Right. I mean, if you go back a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and you want to do a reno, first off, you had to find the contractor that had
Right.
time to do it at that point. You had to suffer the misery of material costing and labor costing was through the roof, still high, but was at that point really through the roof. So, yeah, I don't, we're not expecting any major, downturn in 2024, although it's an election year. So who knows what's going to happen? I would think that, I'm not going to get into politics of everything because I don't really care for any of that. But, if nothing else, we're going to be a lot of times to turn the TV on mute because of all the darn political ads.
Yeah. I think for me, one of the biggest concerns is all the international hostility going on, and knock on wood, God forbid if anything else happens that creates a wider issue, what does that do to things? And I mean, my crystal ball isn't good enough. I will say, relative to our business, one area that is up considerably is military. Now, we're not heavy into military, but we do have some, and that segment of the market is very strong right now for a lot of reasons, which I know you could look at it a couple different ways. From a business standpoint, it's like, hey, great, that market's up, but it's also has a kind of a weird feeling to it.
Well, certainly. Yeah, that's well above my pay grade in terms of international conflict and policy. But right now, we have not seen any major impacts on costing. Crude oil has remained relatively stable. That said, we in 2023, speaking of costing, while we did see some things normalize, some commodity pricing came a little bit back down to earth. At the same time, other things have gone up, both direct costing. I mean, steel, the price of steel has continued to go back up, which affects a lot of our packaging. We've seen raw material prices continue to increase at a slower rate, but still increasing. Some of that is because of continued demand. Some of that is because at the higher point in the stream of supply, during COVID, you saw 3 plants go down to 2, and those suppliers maintain 2 plants, which is sort of, limited supply to kind of control that meter, and that's helped keep prices elevated. You've had some suppliers who are trying to make margin corrections because even though they gave price increases during, post-pandemic craziness, they're still in a net margin negative position. We tried to maintain what we could in terms of pricing, increasing when we had to increase. But despite the increases that we came out with in 2023, we saw some margin erosion because we weren't able to keep up enough. And so we've seen some correction there or corrective action taken. And I'm hopeful in 2024, we don't have to continue to do that and we can continue to maintain some level of stability. But at the end of the day, when you have to put food on your plate and you have employees to maintain and those costs, you've got to maintain the principles of managing the business. And then that also carries forward. Another big thing we saw in 23 that I'm hoping to leave there were indirect costing increases through, we've just gotten absolutely throttled in premiums on commercial insurance. Health insurance wasn't horrible. Thankfully, knock on wood. 22 to 23 was a big bump. 23, 24 was more moderate. But some of our indirect costing, freight is still way up there. Those things have been a challenge to manage.
Yeah. You mentioned we were up a net 15 new employees. Building Team Assessa in 23, I thought we definitely took a positive step. And it's already paying dividends. When you look at some of the folks who are on the team now, already making positive impacts. I'm excited in certain areas. It needed it, and it's starting to prove itself out. We still have some holes to fill. Thinking in sales in Michigan, sales in central and eastern Pennsylvania, to name just a couple. So we'll continue to add to the team and look to continue to improve the roster, so to speak, in 24. But I guess for any employer, for any company, that's the constant struggle, right? Making sure you have the right people on the bus and in the right seats and all that. So I thought we made some positive progress on that in 23, and look to continue that trend in 24.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, even if you go back to 2022, we had a decent amount of expansion, both in, call it, core territory and in non-core or new markets, both geographic and otherwise. That 2023 was really sort of a cleanup year to clean up and sort of relay the foundation of some of that expansion or new opportunity. 2024 will now be putting those dollars that we've invested, significant dollars that we've invested over the last 18 months, putting them to work in terms of generating return, and really focusing sort of back on core territories, because there's certainly a ton of growth opportunity there. And we're really going to put a lot of that elbow grease, sweat equity, and actual both human capital and dollars capital, financial capital, into shoring up and exploiting or leveraging the infrastructure we built to gain that return on core business.
Yeah. So two things that brought to mind. Number one, the pipeline is still strong across the board. So the folks in the Acessa Chemicals division have probably one of the stronger pipelines they've ever had. Acessa Coatings, certainly the same case. And it's, the good news is the pipeline is, the depth and breadth of the pipeline is key too. It's not just, do they have a bunch of accounts in there, but it's a combination of small, medium, and some whale-sized accounts, which is great to see that diversification. In the equipment side too, I think we made some additional vendor relationships in 2023 on the equipment side specifically that I'm thinking of, that I think will certainly pay dividends in 24. Actually, they already started to right before the end of the year, and I look forward to seeing that progress in 24. Had a good meeting actually last week that will help kind of keep that momentum going. So from a pipeline standpoint, I think we're pretty well positioned. Never good enough, right? I mean, you're always hungry and eager to add to that, but I think overall it's pretty strong right now. How do you foresee the pipeline going into, let's say, this is the first part of 24? I know that even though this is 23 recap.
I'm not gonna shy away from being nitpicky and critical on our sales team and the pipeline. As you just mentioned, I would like to see more going into the top of the funnel, and certainly more coming out the bottom. And we've got some pretty, they're not lofty goals. We have some very reasonable but stern goals for our sales team to achieve. And there's going to be a lot of focus on that performance in 2024 to make sure that we're getting out to make sure that we're putting in what we need to, and then gaining out of it, that work. We always say it's behavior, activity, result, and there's a lot of focus there right now on that team, which creates it's a pressure cooker, I think as they say, the boiler room that the sales team seems to sit in, and it's like, hey, great, now go get more. That's the downside to sales. The upside to sales is if you have the behavior and the activity, it'll generate. And I like where our pipeline is at. I like where we're at overall. But it's kind of, when we say more in 24, that volume, it's turning up.
Mm-hmm. A couple other things that stand out as we move forward into 24. But what the products, the ideas and products were started in 2023 are just some of the products that we have on plate. And we can go into some or not, and reserve those for further down the line once they come more into fruition. But the reinvestment that's going to take place, both not just personnel, but the infrastructure, things that we have on tap for 24 are both daunting and exciting at the same time.
Yeah. I'm a little overwhelmed right now. But, and hopeful that as we get through the first quarter, there are some things that are going to launch between now and probably April, May. That should be pretty fun and exciting. A lot of people can be running around with their hair on fire. But, we're even as we grow,
Mine's already burnt.
Well, close enough. Even as we grow, we still, for better or worse, treat ourselves as a small business, and wouldn't have it any other way in terms of just pushing forward. And if we make mistakes, we'll correct it and learn from it, and just kind of keep doing our thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll probably experience some growing pains, which just comes with the territory. It kind of goes back to a recent episode we did with some other fellow entrepreneurs where we're talking about how 80% is planned and 20% is on the fly.
I'd like to say that it's probably being generous.
Well,
we're probably like 60-40 sometimes, but that's okay. It's worked out for us.
The only constants change.
Right. In fact, I was at an event this last weekend with my son. It was a soccer event, and some head college coaches were speaking, and they're saying, you've got to check. There's five boxes that have to be checked. 4 of them you can control for the most part. 1 of them is just chance, and you can't control that. But if you aren't willing to check the other 4 boxes because you're too afraid or averse to the fact that the 5th box is out of your control based on chance, then you're never going to have a chance. Mm-hmm. They're like, play the game of chance and go for it. And sometimes it's going to work out, sometimes it's not. But, we're going to check all of our boxes that we can control, and we're going to, just trust ourselves and our team, which is just a kick-ass team right now, in a lot of areas that I really feel like the chance is Lady Luck's going to come out on our side.
So you're saying there's a chance?
There is.
All right. Well, folks, we stayed true to our word. 23 review in 23 minutes, and here we are at 23 minutes. So thank you all for joining us on this episode of the Industrious Podcast. Happy New Year. Good luck to all of you in 24. Remember, more in 24, and we'll check back with you as we move along down this calendar year. Again, hit the comments up. What were you thankful for in 23? What were some of the challenges you may have had, and what do you look forward to in 2024? Happy New Year, and don't forget, be industrious.